I'd like to call the meeting of the Legislative Committee to order. I want to welcome everyone here today as we go through with our committee assignments and look at the details that have been very active in the last weeks. And at this time, I'd like to ask Josh Waller, who is our Director of Policy and Government Affairs, to come forward to give us a legislative update. And before he gives us that update, I think he needs a round of applause, as well as our commissioner and Angela and many others, as they were working through the night last night for the actual day that House bills had an opportunity to get over to the Senate and the Senate back over to the House. So thank you for all the hard work that you did yesterday, each and every one of you. So, and with that, Josh, would you please give us an update?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and committee, commissioner. I appreciate everything, the board support, commissioner support, and we'll talk a little bit about the activities thus far. That's why it starts with the calendar. You can see where we are. Yesterday was crossover day, day 28, as mentioned, and then they are in practically every weekday, save the next the Thursday of next week and of that following week for committee days. So it's going to be back-to-back legislative days, working their way to April 4th, which is sine die, with 2 committee days over the course of that. As mentioned yesterday, the House was in pretty late. The Senate broke out a little bit sooner, making sure that they got the last bills that they needed to get across to the other chamber. Now, as a reminder, that doesn't mean that while those bill numbers are either dead or alive because they've crossed over, the concepts and the guts can find themselves attached to other bills. So that's something we'll continue to keep an eye out for. First off, I know one of great importance is House Bill 304, and that was sort of a recent development, temporary motor fuel tax suspension. And so for the benefit of the board, I know there's been a lot of inquiries about it. I put primarily the full bill text there, and you can see it's just a straight suspension of the motor fuel tax through May the 31st. To give you some context, the bill sponsor is one of the floor leaders, Jody Lott, Representative Jody Lott. And in testimony she gave, she underscored about the issue of, for this 2-month period and some change. And I'll give you some. So this bill's passed the House. It has passed Senate committee, and it's actually on the calendar today in the Senate. So the expectation is the Senate will probably quickly pass it and could be sent to the governor as early as today for his consideration and potential signature, maybe tomorrow. I don't know what the timeline is for transferring, but it is on Senate calendar today. But back to sort of the committee consideration, Jody Lott, when asked the question, Representative Lott, when asked the question about the backfill and the impact of revenue, affirmed that they will be backing this up with the reserve so that we won't see a change in the revenue estimate. As a reminder, motor fuel collected in one fiscal year, that dollar amount that DOR says, that's the amount that's appropriated, used as the basis for appropriation the fall year. So one fiscal year, it's collected, the next appropriated. So the impact for any collections that weren't collected and where we are fiscal 22 would impact fiscal 23. And to that point,
I've been asked so many questions about this situation here. What are we appropriated for motor fuel tax? What's the governor he is suspending?
So, and I'll show you this, and y'all will get a much deeper dive here very shortly in the Finance Committee. But concurrent with the movement of the suspension bill, the House passed the full fiscal year 23, and you can see there on the left highlighted in green, that was the governor's initial budget estimate pre all of this, and you can see that number compared to what the House passed, knowing the suspension bill was moving and likely to be signed. You can actually see it's an increase, and the treasurer will explain that because there were some fund source swaps. So, but the point here is there is no harm shown in the budget or no reduction attributed to that suspension. That goes back to the point that Representative Lott made, was that the anticipation is because of the state's rainy day fund and what's called the uncommitted reserves or something to that effect. There we go, unrestricted reserves, that it will be backfilled. So that continues to be the understanding as it's moved through. And there were a lot of legislative questions, both in the House and Senate, and that was affirmed multiple times.
Question of process. I mean, in the past, hasn't the governor just been able to, without legislation, suspend the gas tax? And if so, why is this different?
So when the General Assembly is in session, the governor cannot do it via executive order.
I see.
Additionally, when the governor does that executive order out of session, that is an executive order that is telling the Department of Revenue to cease the collection of the tax, and that the next convening of the General Assembly, they actually have to go back and approve it, which they've done every time. They go back and approve a resolution that actually removes the tax liability. So the governor cannot, by executive order, solely remove liability. It has to be affirmed by the General Assembly. He can tell them to not collect.
Any other questions?
On that.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to cover a few key crossover legislation. The Department's annual housekeeping bill. We've got two versions, companion one in the House and one in the Senate. House Bill 1438, Senate Bill 558. One addition to the bill that was brought to us at the request of Legislative Council was when there's a convening of the delegations for board elections, they've asked for, instead of the mailing address of legislators, to be able to use their email as the official notice, which candidly, when they're in session, makes a lot of sense anyways. They're going to be checking their emails much sooner than they'll be opening a letter that comes to them. So they asked for that to be included, so that was included in the housekeeping bill. Two of the items deal again with, we had recent changes last session to our P3 code statute, and then the introduction of a new code statute, a new code section dealing with alternative contracting methods. Both of two of the sections in this housekeeping bill just deal with some cleanup items, and then the last one is sort of a belt and suspenders to ensure that, because of just the increase in use of data for purposes of transportation planning and being able to serve the public better, we want to ensure that nobody through open records can ever get to, either through us or through a vendor that may have a contract with the state, any data about an individual and their location, travel, or anything like that through the back door. Obviously, we know with cell phone probe data, that information could be out there. The department, everything we have anonymous. We get it anonymized. Concern was always, though, what about a contractor? So this is just to ensure that there's no way, shape, or form open records could be abused to do that. Next, there was some discussion about EV, electric vehicle charging legislation. At the present time, there doesn't seem to be a consensus around a bill. So they've got a study committee that'll have 4 House members, 4 senators, and this is passed the Senate, and then some agency heads, including the commissioner, DOT commissioner, so economic development, and the chairman of the Public Service Commission. So they'll look at it for the next year. And really what that comes down to is, if they're under state law, they actually have, they have to change the law to make it legal to resell electricity for purposes of charging a vehicle. So they have to do that, and as part of that conversation, there's been other different parties that are looking to be engaged in that. There's sort of different perspectives on how that market should be structured. That's the area where they're going to have to reach some sort of a consensus. Next is Senate Bill 586 was, it's not department legislation, but something that came out of the counties, looking to just mirror our design build statute to ensure that, make it explicit that they have the ability to design build. And that's Senate Bill 586. It's basically a cut and paste of our statute. And then House Bill 1372, which we've talked about, which is the 811 call before you dig law. It has passed out of the House. It's actually going to be in the Senate Regulated Industries Committee tomorrow. So we'll be attending that hearing and listening in. Current version is, if it remains unamended, the department has been neutral. We will be a part of 811, but we will not have to pay for the membership, and we will not be subject to the PSC, which has certainly been an area of concern, is having one state agency subject to jurisdiction of the other. So hopefully it's a good compromise, and so we'll continue to monitor it and make sure that compromise stays in place. Then there's one item that didn't cross over that was part of the subject of our conversation yesterday, and it was dealing with increasing gross vehicle truck weights on our state routes, which is something this department has historically had concerns with. And you'll actually have a presentation later kind of talking about the impact of increased weights, particularly on the bridges. So that was, there was an effort. The bill couldn't make it out of committee, and so Everyone was on sort of high alert for it getting attached to something else yesterday. Thankfully, it was not. But again, things can certainly, until day 40, we'll have to continue to be mindful of that. Federal update, pretty straightforward. The president yesterday signed the omnibus federal fiscal year 22 Appropriations Act. So now, about halfway through the fiscal year, we have now full funding through September 30th. And so it follows exactly with the IIJA. And as you'll hear from the treasurer soon, thankfully, the General Assembly is also taking steps to ensure we have the ability to match those additional federal funds. With that, that concludes my presentation, subject to any additional questions.
Do you have any questions? Yes, Jeff.
Josh, I want to go back for just a minute, something you said on the electrification resolution they're studying. Do you have enough information at this point? You mentioned the term resale of electricity. Can you maybe explain a little bit more deeper what that might mean, or has that even been determined yet?
So resale, so if you, under current law today, if you do not produce electricity, if you are not a producer of electricity, you cannot sell electricity. So for a third party, such as a convenience store or similar that is not an energy producer, they legally cannot sell by the kilowatt hour. You cannot plug in and sell electricity. One workaround that other states that you've seen, because other states have this similar law, is you'll sometimes see people renting a spot. They are paying for a spot, and that spot just also happens to have access to a charger. So that's one of the workarounds that exist today, but for a long-term purpose of the market, they really need to have it clear that they can actually resell, and then you get into a charge per kilowatt hour and things of that like that. So, but that's the impetus. They need that changed in federal and state law to allow that market to develop.
At this point, would you happen to know if solar as a production of electricity is going to be on the table or considered?
I think their goal is to look at kind of broadly electric vehicle charging, so I wouldn't want to presume where they may go or what all the hearings they may have. But the point being is they couldn't reach a consensus on structuring the market, so they wanted, the goal was to do a study committee and kind of take a very broad look at what's required. And in the future, I think it focuses on transportation, so the effect of EV and transportation. So.
Any other questions to Josh? Seeing none, thank you, Josh, so very much. And again, thank you for all your extra work that you're doing, as well as many others in your team.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. No further business of this committee. We stand adjourned.
Committee meeting for the Georgia Department of Transportation to order, please. Ms. Whitworth, how are you?
I am fabulous.
Great. We're glad to hear that.
I am really fabulous. The governor has just signed the amended budget earlier today. So I will say to all of you, we have been extremely blessed thus far. You see the governor and his staff, your House members and your senators, please thank them for our amended FY22 budget. I'm going to go through the highlights now of the final amended budget. Excise was unchanged in the final version. Fees, you'll see an increase of $56 million in fees, totaling $186 million. In the ride shares, you'll see a $9.8 million increase, bringing that total to $17.5 million. You'll see state general funds and prior year funds. I'll highlight this a little bit further on in the presentation. You'll see an increase of $155.5 million, bringing that to $157 million. And then at the bottom, you'll see the transactions for the adjustments for Greta, which is not included in our budget. Those are actually in the community affairs budget. All right. The next slide you'll see here is our pie chart, not our pie chart, our graph chart that I typically do for all of you that highlights each of the programs lumped together. As you can see, the capital projects program, which consists of capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads admin, that is our highest at it's at 48%, almost half of the budget. The next highest category is routine maintenance, which consists of roughly 19% of the overall budget. In general operations, that's the remainder of all the programs that have all the people within the agency. The departmental admin, program delivery, data collections, planning, traffic management make up that program. Next, you'll see excise at 10% of the you'll see percent of excise, bringing that to $196 million. And then in payments to CERTA, there's roughly $88 million in payments to CERTA. Then in intermodal, there's $71 million that's being allocated. I'll remind y'all, intermodal is airport aid, rail, transit, ports, and waterways. You'll see the GEO bond debt service, and then finally payments to the ATL, which is now administratively attached to the department. All right, here is the breakout of all of the programs, and as you can see it, we've included a new column for the fund sources, so you can see the mix between motor fuel fees, state general funds, because state general funds have been layered into this budget. And in the GEO bond debt category, it's roughly $145 million. What you see here is a fund source swap in debt service between fees and motor fuel. In capital construction, there is an additional $52 million being added in to the capital program to bring that total to $949 million. In capital maintenance, you'll see no change in capital maintenance. As you see here, there is a new program called Iija Match, which this consists of, and y'all have heard the commissioner talk about it in meetings, you've heard Josh talk about it. With the additional OA that we received in the federal program, we were requiring additional match. So working through the House, the Senate, the governor's office, we were able to align and receive those funds to be able to match those additional federal dollars coming into the program. And that's what that is here. And that's a combination of state general funds and a few $23.4 million of prior year funds. In program delivery, data collections, departmental admin, and planning. Also on this next slide, in routine maintenance and in traffic management, all of this is adjustments for the $5,000 pay raise that the governor was instituting into there, in recruitment, retention, and vacancies throughout the department make up that category. In intermodal, you will see in intermodal that some state general funds are replacing intermodal. You'll also see being added into intermodal the $5,000 pay increase that the governor recommended in his budget. Including in intermodal is $1 million to fund the replacement ferry at Sapelo Island. And then you'll see in part of the intermodal budget is transit. You'll see $5.8 million going toward rural transit needs, as well as $4 million going to support transit throughout the state. Next, you'll see also included in this is some state general funds. There's roughly $10.6 million are being added to short line railroads to do the Class 2, bring them up to Class 2 standards, which I'll remind you is being able to carry the 286,000 pounds and go 25 miles an hour. These funds will help us leverage CRISI grants that are being brought forth at this time that require a 50% match in order to do those. And then finally, you'll see $18.5 million that's included in intermodal for airport aid projects all throughout the state. The next slide here is in payments to CERTA. There's no change in payments to CERTA. And then finally, in payments to the ATL, what this $115,000 does, it adjusts the $5,000 pay raise that the governor was giving statewide. So as you can see in our 22 budget, amended budget, we were extremely blessed. The $5,000 pay raise for the state employees got adjusted, as well as we received those additional dollars we needed for federal match, as well as receiving airport aid funds, as well as rail funds. Do I have any questions on the amended before I move on to 23?
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Abel.
Kevin?
Can you go back to the one where you had the detail with IIJA line item?
Yes, sir.
So, a few questions there. So that 106 million, that corresponds to the 20% share that the local match, right?
We went through and calculated our needs that we would need within our budget, and that makes up a large portion of that match need. Yes, sir.
Okay. So just doing the math, that suggests that the total is the 100% would be 500 million. Is that right? The money from the federal government plus the local match would be 500 million of budget. Am I making sense?
What we're looking for is the delta in the increase. So the increase over the 2 years is roughly $676 million. Currently within the budget, you have existing budget capacity with your existing OA. Then when you layer on the new and we look at the project mix, as well as with additional funding coming into capital construction, you look at all of those match needs and you look at the program as a whole, and we have enough for 22 and for 23 to do the match currently.
So that was my question. Okay. So that's covering 2 years of match. Okay.
That does not cover 24, 25, and 26.
Okay.
And we will address those needs as we come to those years.
Thanks.
Angela, let me add in, and thanks for that clarifying question, because right now with the president just signing the appropriations yesterday, there's 6 months left in the federal fiscal year and roughly 3 here left in the state fiscal year. So there's going to be a compression of federal authorizations that leave this state budget year and move into the next. So as Angela said before, adding this new program is just awesome. I mean, it really is a game changer to keep the federal program going and not to come at the expense of the state-funded programs and projects, which we call HB 170 projects. So this was very welcomed and a big lift from the General Assembly, from House and Senate, and obviously the governor signing it is huge. So this is really a good outcome, that we keep everything going and take advantage of leveraging those new federal dollars. So great opportunity and super excited about it. And again, it helps us in this budget year and next federal budget year as well.
Is that it?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, on the heart of Georgia, how much are we? You mentioned that, how much was that budget?
Yeah, I don't know if I have it on my hip unless Angela's got it in her notes.
I don't have the whole total. We can get it.
There was a nice add. Was it 10 million in rail? 10 million was added for, and I don't know if it said Heart of Georgia.
It says, no, it's 10.6 million to bring short line rail to Class 2 standards.
And we have utilization of some of those dollars to go with some federal Chrissy grant opportunities on Heart of Georgia. And I'll get with you. I think it leverages about $5 million, I believe, on Heart of Georgia. But let us make sure of that.
Okay.
I didn't bring my budget notes. I should have.
All right. Okay. Any more questions on amended? All right. We're going to move into the 23. This is as of the House version. The commissioner and myself met yesterday morning with the Senate to go over the budget recommendation for 23. As you can see here, there's a add of $48.8 million being added in for excise to bring it to a little bit over $2 billion. The Transportation Trust Fund, which as y'all have known as fees in the past, there's an additional $20 million being added to bring that to $150 million. The Transit Trust Fund, which is the rideshare component, there's an additional $8.2 million over the base budget, bringing that to $15 million. There's a combination of some items in state general funds of $36 million that bring that to $38. And then you can see the adjustment for Greta for the pay raise that is actually reflected in the community affairs budget. What I did here for informational purposes, and like the commissioner has liked to mention in all of our hearings, here's how the amended budget laid out compared to currently the FY23 budget. As you can tell, these numbers are fairly low compared to the projection. And as Mr. Floyd was talking about, concerned about the House bill that's being passed. Currently right now, through the House and the Senate, there's been no recommendation to adjust our revenue estimate down. So far, so good. All right, then the next slide consists of the graph that y'all are historically used to seeing from me, and we'll go back to this. Like capital projects consist roughly of like 48%, roughly the same as over the previous in the amended. Routine maintenance is at 21%, second largest. General operations, like I mentioned, where all of the employees are at. Traffic management, planning, departmental admin. All of those offices are embedded in that department. Let's see here. Payments to CERTA, $56 million. Payments to CERTA, I got my chart here is off. $49.2 million is being added into payments to CERTA. Intermodal is $56.9 million. You'll see our debt service has gone down in 23, which consists of $108 million, and then finally payments to the ATL. All right. Here we go in the layout that we have by fund source. You'll see in the GO bond debt service, our debt service has gone down. You'll see a reduction of $36.5 million due to our debt service being reduced to $108 million for the year. In capital construction, you'll see the additional $14.3 million being added for additional projects. In capital maintenance, let's take note to the $85 million. Y'all may recall in the amended 21 and 22 budget, we did a swap here with the COVID relief funds temporarily at that time. What this does is that this supplants those funds and restores the base for capital maintenance. Next, in program delivery and data collections, really also on the next slide here, you'll see in departmental admin, planning, routine maintenance, and traffic management, all of these adjustments addressed annualizing the $5,000 pay adjustment that the governor put into the budget. They also put in there for all employees are eligible to buy out 1 week paid leave. That's included in there. The annual GSEPs calculation that's increasing from 3 to 9 is embedded in there. So all of those programs reflect those items. With the exclusion and planning, you'll see that the reduction there. What that is there is a one-time funds that were appropriated to planning last year for $500,000 for a regional planning study. Those are being removed from the budget this year. All right, next you'll see intermodal. You see a lot of activity going on this slide. Previously, intermodal was all one program. What you see here is intermodal being broke back out into the individual programs. And really what this is for is to be in compliance with House Bill 511. When they took the rideshare fees were created in 2020 in House Bill 105 and put into a transit trust fund, those funds were to be used exclusively for transit in the state. So what this does, it just streamlines them breaking out so you can see very seamlessly where those funds are going. And so they've broken them back out into their individual programs now rather than being collapsed. In airport aid, you'll see them establishing the base, as well as they've added $9 million increase in airport aid to bring that program's total to $26 million. In ports and waterways, they've established the base, as well as done the adjustments for the pay raise, the 1 week payout, GSEPs, and a small payment that they have to make to SAO for PeopleSoft billing, TeamWorks billing. In the rail program, you'll see the adjustment here of the base being established, as well as the payout for the leave that I've talked a lot about thus far. You'll also see a reduction of $75,000 coming out of this, which is one-time funding for the Hazelhurst line for some clearing, as well as some one-time funding of $50,000 for the Ogeechee Railroad line. Also in this, you'll see a $10 million ad for rail improvements to bring our short line railroads into Class 2 standards that we talked about in the amended as well, and they put it in the FY23 budget. In transit, you'll see the two trust fund sources broken out here, the transportation trust fund fees and the transit trust fund. Embedded in this is a $1 million reduction for one-time funding that was given for a freight and logistics planning study. And then what you see down in the bottom on the $15.9 million in that transit trust fund, it breaks out into two categories. $2.8 million is established for rural transit, and 11.88 of that 15.9 is established for transit initiatives throughout. On this next slide, in payments to CERTA, you'll see a decrease of $38.8 million. What this is due to lower debt service and the release of one-time funds from the Debt Common Reserve Fund are being released, and so you will see that's why the $38 million is a reduction in payments to CERTA. And then in the ATL, you'll see the add there, and all that is doing the adjustments needed to make sure the $5,000 pay raise and all of the other payouts that was included in those initiatives can be funded to the ATL. And then finally, there was $2.96 million appropriated in bonds to do those Class 2 standard grade upgrades. So they had a combination of state general funds and bond dollars to bring us up to roughly a little bit over $13 million. Any questions on the 23?
Anybody have any questions or comments? Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner, you got a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand, Russell, excuse me.
Sorry about that. Just to comment again and to reaffirm that this was a very solid budget and a great budget process. The adds to intermodal, to aviation, and then rail, as Angela just showed on that last one, $10.6 million added for short line rail in 22, and then $10 million added in 23, plus the bond at 2.96. Gets us pretty darn close to bringing, as Angela's talked about twice now, bringing all the state-owned short lines up to that Class 2 standards for the rails and the ballast. I remind you that when we gave a presentation some months ago about the rail plan, the state rail plan, there's a lot of bridges and trestles that need rehabilitation and work as well so that they can hold up that weight. So this gets us a long way on the rails and the ballast and helps with bridges as well. And the other benefit of this, as Angela mentioned, is the potential to leverage the federal CRISI grants, which is the Consolidated Rail Safety Infrastructure something. So it's a great opportunity to parlay these dollars on a 50-50 match to do more work than we would have otherwise. So it's really a great outcome, and it's very rare to see this kind of investment in the intermodal programs based on historical appropriations. So very good budgets, and again, just one last time, having the new program in the 22 of the Iija Match really is a benefit. So couldn't be more proud and excited to have this opportunity to continue to advance transportation for Georgia. So thank you.
Does that, the Class 2 rail, is all our Class 2 rail now? I mean, everything will be moved up to Class 2 rail?
That's the objective, is to get it to that standard, and so that you can haul basically a full carload, a train carload, and the speed of 25 miles an hour, which doesn't sound super fast, but it's a lot faster than 2 or 3 miles an hour where some of the rail conditions are now. So that's a big improvement.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I will call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order and ask Andrew Heath, our Deputy Chief Engineer, to give us an update on the Iija Bridge update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the committee, Commissioner. My name is Andrew Heath, Deputy Chief Engineer for the department. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to give an update on our bridge program, specifically focusing on the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law impact and a new program that was introduced through that legislation. Just a brief overview of the agenda I've got here. Just want to give a little background on the bridges that we have in the state, how many, what their overall condition is, how we fund bridges for replacement or repair across the state, talk a little bit about the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law program, and then get into the sort of the staff that help make this program possible and some of the innovations that they are introducing into the program. So To start off, just a snapshot of the number of bridge structures we have in the state. This is both on and off system. It's quite a few. It's almost 15,000 bridges in the state of Georgia. Of that 15,000, almost 15,000, currently 1,418 of those are posted from a weight limit perspective, with 49 being closed. I do want to highlight here those 6 bridges that are state-owned that are closed. All 6 of those are currently in the process of being replaced. So we are obviously not ignoring bridges that are closed. Now, if I could take a quick second on this slide to talk through that posted number, as there's been a lot of discussion over at the Capitol this session regarding weight limits on bridges and the importance of that, and subsequent posting of bridges and what leads to the posting of a structure. And in order to do that, I've got to wind the clock back to 1975. And in 1975, Congress enacted what is known as the Federal Bridge Formula. This is actually a mathematical formula that governs the maximum axle weight that a truck can carry on the interstate system, and sets a gross weight limit of 80,000 pounds for a truck. Now, the formula kind of moves depending on the shape and configuration of the truck, the spacing of the axles. That dictates what weights can be. But that formula is run to understand the impact of a truck crossing a bridge and what those constraints could be, right? GDOT, along with all the other states in the country, follow that bridge formula. So we have consistency across the interstate system in managing this aspect of our infrastructure. So with that in mind, our bridge designers utilize a design load, what we call a live load, or trucks crossing the bridge, that factors into the design of the structure as they either replace it or design a new bridge. And they design that to target both the factor of safety and ensuring a long-term service life of that asset. We subsequently then do routine inspections of our structures, and we do what's known as a load rating analysis to understand A, the design of the bridge, and then B, how is the bridge doing out in the field? What is the actual condition of the bridge, the various structural elements that govern how it's performing? And we develop what's known as a load rating. If the load rating for that bridge is above those limits, then the bridge is not posted. If the load rating for that bridge is below those limits, then the bridge is subsequently posted, which restricts access across that structure based on that load configuration. So when you see that sign and it says X tons of your limit, 1, it's a number that you might see, but 2, it's a configuration of the truck that you also might see, which speaks back to that federal bridge formula that was developed almost 50 years ago. So I want to just provide a little bit of a history lesson there as I introduce that number, to so you kind of understand that dynamic as it has been playing out for us sort of in real time here this session. Getting back to our overall inventory of bridges, I wanted to highlight this for you guys to show that this is not a static number. As our infrastructure system expands, as we introduce new projects, we introduce new structures as well. So this can come in the form of grade separations being developed, or the Northwest Corridor project, for example, introducing quite a number of structures up along that system. But you can see that our asset inventory continually grows, which sort of speaks to continued maintenance and continued need to invest in this specific program. To speak about what we invest as a department into our bridge program, I wanted to take just a very high-level view of this, kind of from the top down. So this is a pie chart taken directly from our statewide transportation improvement program, which breaks out our investment by asset type. And you can see bridge called out there on the top right of the pie chart, or $1.697 billion over 4 years. That averages out to be about $424 million a year invested into our bridges. That number goes up and down depending on the specific year that you're looking at. But from an average investment level, this is what the department is putting into our structures from either a replacement or repair maintenance perspective. And what I've got listed here for you is just the various programs that we utilize that makes up that investment level. So a set aside in the capital program, our low impact bridge program on supporting some of our off-system structures, the bridge maintenance lump sum to repair structures, and then obviously, as you guys know, a number of bonds have been sold in recent years that is also feeding into this number. To give you a snapshot of what that means in real time, our bridge office and designers are currently touching 372 bridges across the state, either in the preliminary design, right-of-way or construction phases of these projects. So we are underway with 372 bridge projects as of today. So obviously a very large workload that these folks are working on. What they utilize to prioritize which structures are being targeted for either replacement or repair, looking at condition, going back to postings, weight restrictions, taking a look at critical features or structures to see what that condition is. Is the bridge temporarily shored, essentially shoring up the bridge for a period of time while we wait for a replacement to come through? Looking at priority routes or freight corridors where we might have a large number of trucks, as example. And then looking at, obviously, a life cycle cost determination for either replacing a structure or doing some sort of intermediate rehab. But bottom line is our staff within the bridge group is touching a lot of structures at any given time as they manage the program. All of that investment has led to what I believe is a very good story that the department can share. And if you take a look at this table, this is from our 2021 Accountability and Investment Report. Unfortunately, this reads right to left, so you kind of have to look at it backwards. But going back to 2017, I'll draw your attention to the top row there on the state-owned on-system bridges in good condition. 47% of our bridges were in good condition in 2017. And you can see what the investment has done. We're now in 2021, where 77% of our bridges are in good condition. And you can see similar improvements on the off-system bridges as well. And then correspondingly, as you go down into bridges in fair condition or poor condition, that number is reversed, where the number of fair was a much higher percentage, now dropping, which is good. Those are moving up into the fair or into the good category. And similarly, with poor, where only 1% of our bridges is currently rated as a poor bridge on system, which is obviously a tremendous story, speaks to the investment and work of our staff here at the department. Don't take our word for it. This is a snapshot from the American Road and Transportation Builders Association showing the same thing, or showing a slightly different lens of this, but this is bridges that are structurally deficient in Georgia trending over time. And you can see that downward trend line here in Georgia, where again, just over 1% are classified as structurally deficient, kind of speaking back to those poor condition bridges. So obviously a trend line that we want to continue as we maintain our infrastructure and our assets. From that same report, this just kind of shows how we are doing in relation to other states across the country, where we are in that 0 to 5% of poor bridges. Alabama, Florida are also there, but not every state in the country is there. So we want to stay in that top category, stay in that upper echelon of maintaining our structures here in Georgia. So now switching gears to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as I mentioned, a new program was introduced in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, specifically funding bridge projects. So we're going to be able to leverage this new program to supplement what we've already been doing and continue our investment into our repair and replacement programs. The GDOT allocation of this program is $225 million from FY22 through 25, or $45 million per fiscal year. I highlighted that piece, the $45 million, to show that that is the minimum allocation amount that a state can receive, which seems like bad news, but it's really sort of good news and bad news at the same time. We're receiving the minimum amount because we've done a really good job of taking care of our bridges. That formula program is based upon the overall condition of your assets, and if you have a number of poor bridges, you would receive more funding. If you're doing a much better job, you would receive less funding. We are receiving the minimum allocation, which speaks to the work the department's done, but obviously it would, at the same time, it would be nice to receive a little bit more money. But eligibility for replacement, rehab, preservation, protection, construction, the activities that are right in our wheelhouse, we're going to continue our work. There is a caveat there that there's 100% federal share with no state or local match required for locally owned bridges on functionally classified local roads. So that's a new aspect in this law that we're going to take a look at and see what assets we have in the state that could take advantage of that provision. And that last bullet there just showing that Josh alluded to, we recently had Congress pass and the President signed full FY22 appropriations for the BIL, which is great news. Prior to that, this program was actually specifically called out with advanced appropriations from the general fund at the federal level. So even though that was all playing out with full appropriations, this program was able to advance in the background. And we have already identified a number of projects that are moving into this program and are consuming some of that obligation authority that's being made available. So speaking of the impact of higher truck weights, I gave you that history lesson on postings and what that sort of means for the department. Kind of going back to a recent discussion at the General Assembly and dialogue that's been taking place there. What you're seeing here, this graphic illustrates bridges that would need to be posted in Georgia if the weights were to be changed from that 80,000 limit to a 92,000 pound limit for specific commodity types. All those dots in yellow on the map there, additional bridges that would have to be posted, which would restrict crossings at that load combination, at that higher load combination. It's almost 900 bridges that are within a 30-mile radius of the timber mills in our state, just to highlight from our perspective what additional weights would mean in trucks if those were to be allowed. The department obviously would need to upgrade and replace to accommodate those higher loads over time, which would take time and obviously take funding to do so. But more broadly, we would expect shorter lifespan of structures. As I alluded to, the work that our team does, they are analyzing and designing bridges, anticipating that longer service life of a structure. If you increase those weights, you would expect that duration to shorten. So not only would it impact, higher weights would they impact about 900 structures immediately that would need to be posted. We would need to look holistically at our program and all of our assets to see what that means in the longer term. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that weight dynamic. So who makes it happen? If I could ask Haral and Don to wave real quick. Those two lead our bridge unit between both the design and maintenance units. We've got 54 employees within the design group, 6 groups specifically focused on design, 1 group specifically focused on hydraulics, and then we have folks governing policy standards and technical services as well. Those folks are responsible for, as I mentioned, 327 bridges being touched at the moment, all running through that office and doing a tremendous job in doing so. And then on the maintenance side, also 54 employees, 12 topside inspection teams, 2 specialized teams, 2 underwater teams. We have divers on staff that go and look at footings and piers that are underwater to see what their condition is. 2 licensed drone pilots that can assist in inspections and emergency response. And you can see that team inspected almost 10,000 bridges in FY21. So a tremendous body of work by that group. Just some great photos of some of the work that we've done. 369 over the Chattahoochee River. This was a bond-funded project just to kind of highlight one of the bigger structures recently replaced here in the state. 18 over CSX in Meriwether County, also a bond-funded project. And then a little bit, something smaller but no less important, County Road 44, Casey Road over the Unawati Creek in Franklin County. This is a low-impact bridge project, a shorter-term, minimal impact from an environmental perspective. Get in and get out as quick and getting a nice new bridge at the end of the day through that program. And then showing some of the work that the bridge maintenance team does. You can see some deck repair there on the top left, looking at some repair of some pilings and shoring up of those on the bottom, polymer deck overlay in the middle to try to extend the service life of the deck there. And then on the right, an issue there with scour and obviously debris in the channel there that we need to take care of. So just a little bit different aspect of everything that the bridge team does. And then speaking to their culture of innovation that they have, we like to think of the bridge design, they are conservative by nature, and we like that. We want our structures to be sound and to stay up, but they find ways to be innovative in their jobs, to be more efficient, more nimble. So the transition to a remote work environment during the COVID pandemic and utilization of the Microsoft Teams application or electronic reviews jointly through Bluebeam rather than hard copy plans, that transition has played out, which has led to tremendous efficiency in design. From a maintenance perspective, you can see a snooper truck to get underneath the superstructure of a bridge and take a look underneath with a 65-foot reach. That's a new acquisition for them. Or utilizing drones to inspect the underside of the deck there for potential cracking or something of that nature. Again, finding ways to be more efficient in their workloads. And then from a materials perspective, this is a pretty neat, this is high performance concrete that essentially, you can almost think of this as plug and play, right? You drop it in, precast deck that you drop in, and then you can shorten the duration of a bridge closure by potentially utilizing that construction technique in those materials. So all in all, just a tremendous job by Don and his folks and what they do to manage an ever-growing program across the state, and they've done an amazing job to position us as truly one of the top bridge programs in the country. So with that, I'll end my remarks and happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'll say, Andrew, that every time I go kayaking on Lake Lanier, I go under 53, the construction going on right now by Gainesville Marina over there, and inspect the bridge from below. So you can add one to your number of bridge inspectors. Thanks very much for the report, and thanks to Harel and the others on the team there, and for everything that you guys do. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Transportation Planning and Strategic Committee together, and I would like to call up first. We have some presentations in regards to our Scenic Byways, and we are excited about that. And if I could have our Assistant Office Head for the Office of Planning to come forward, and that's Rainey Simpson.
Madam Chair, board members, Commissioner, thank you all for your time this afternoon. Have a topic today regarding the Scenic Byways program. You may be familiar with it, or it may be new to you, but it's an exciting program. And I'd like to give you an overview of the program, as well as talk about two application requests. So without further ado, the Scenic Byways program has been around for a minute, actually since 1991, and it allows the state DOTs to designate corridors as official scenic byways. And these byways are all across Georgia, and I'm going to show you a map in a moment. But these qualities that a scenic byways has, they have 6 qualities. There's a map I mentioned a moment ago. At the bottom.
Hey, Randy, can you adjust your mic there? We can't hear. Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you, Commissioner.
Up.
Oh, hang on a minute. Come on, Kel.
We're not used to tall people. Just
All right.
You're vertically challenged in a positive manner, as I'm in a negative manner.
Thank you. Let me back up just a minute then. You see our agenda. The Scenic Byways program was established back in 1991 under ICE-T, and GDOT's had a Scenic Byways program since 1992. You'll see before you a map of scenic byway locations across Georgia, and I wanted to emphasize there's a website on the department's website where you can read information about all of these scenic byways. But I'd like to point out the one that's highlighted in red. That's actually a national scenic byway, and that was designated back in June of 2000. So Ms. Ann and I were talking and preparing for this meeting, and she noted that there is a wealth of opportunities across Georgia. Nothing against our interstate highways, but there's a great opportunity to travel across Georgia, see some of the historic areas all across Georgia, and just kind of have a slower pace. The nice thing about the Scenic Byways program is primarily driven by local sponsors. The sponsor will work with GDOT, and the department's role is to be sure that the Scenic Byway designation process is adhered to. Just a few housekeeping items. A Scenic Byway simply means no new billboards could be added along the corridor. Existing billboards can remain. There's collaboration with the Outdoor Advertising Association, and here are the upcoming intrinsic qualities that I was alluded to a moment ago. Archaeological, cultural, historic rather, natural, recreational, and scenic. All across Georgia, we have all of those characteristics that can be explored. Just a brief overview of the process itself. The local sponsor will contact and coordinate with GDOT. In-house, we'll do a technical review at the department. The local sponsor early in the process will coordinate and collaborate with the GDOT board member and the property owners, and there are actually 2 public meetings held and facilitated by the local sponsor. Once that process is completed, the sponsor generates and develops a corridor management plan, identifying and documenting one of the qualities we just spoke about. And once the draft CMP or the corridor management plan is generated, that's provided to Georgia DOT's planning team. We in turn give that to the Department of Community Affairs, and through that agency, we coordinate with Department of Natural Resources. So that's a brief overview of the designation process itself. Any questions?
Any questions from anyone? Well, at this time, we have got 2 proposals to bring before the board, which we're very excited about. And I think that you've heard from this explanation that it's a long, drawn-out affair. It's just not something that you apply for one day and you get the next day. It's something that goes through a long process, which is a very positive process, because we want people to be very proud, the locals as well as anyone that may be visiting throughout our state for the Scenic Byways. So with that, would you tell us the 2 applications that we have before us today?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. The first one is the Tybee Road Byway. It's located in CD1. It's sponsored by the Tybee Road Byway Steering Committee, and it will primarily serve as a scenic connector between Savannah and the Tybee Island. It's approximately 11 miles long along US 80, and specifically it would traverse from the Turner Creek Bridge, that's just east of the Bryan Wood Road, to the terminus of the Tybee Street in downtown Tybee Island. And just some areas of interest, Fort Pulaski and the Tybee Island Light Station. And the other one is the South Douglas Byway. That's located in CD 13 and is sponsored by Douglas County. It's approximately 19 miles along State Route 166 from the Carroll Douglas County line to its intersection with State Route 92. And some features along that Scenic Byway would be the Anahuac Mounds, the Chattahoochee Greenway Trail, Dog River Reservoir, and it's very close by to Sweetwater Creek State Park. Assuming approval by this body, the GDOT team would add it to our state highway map. We would feature these 2 scenic byways on our GDOT website, and also the GDOT district team would generate and provide signage for the byways. The local sponsor still has some legwork to do. They would coordinate with our district team on the signage, and they would install the signage along the corridors.
Any questions? Yes, Jeff.
Just a quick question. When you're considering one of these byways, do you take into account what the current zoning of any property adjacent to those right-of-ways might be at the time you're considering that?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there any reason why you wouldn't take that into consideration?
Well, it's primarily influenced by the 6 intrinsic qualities. That's the driving force, and that the land use doesn't necessarily come into play per se directly. Now, I mean, subject to the land use, I can see how particular type land usage could interfere or prohibit those type of qualities that we're looking at on the screen now.
Right. So if I heard you right, so if there was a piece of property, say, zoned commercial, that zoning could prohibit it qualifying as a scenic byway.
I'd like to see that area if you wouldn't mind.
No, these are just general questions.
I mean, it could be a factor for sure.
Then on the flip side of that, if a byway was approved with, say, a commercial zoning already in place, how might that impact some type of development on that commercial zoning or any type of zoning with development use?
Right. That's a good question, Board Member Lewis, and that probably would be good to point out.
Let me jump in, Mr. Lewis.
Commissioner?
Sorry, Chair. So this doesn't affect what somebody can do on a zoned piece of property, with the exception of billboard.
Right.
So if it's already zoned or even rezoned through the county, it doesn't have an effect for commercial utilization. It does limit installation of billboards is what it does.
That's its only limitation.
That's the limitation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're okay with the answer? Okay. Thank you. Any other questions that we have? Well, at this time, I would like this committee that is with the Statewide Transportation Planning and the Strategic Planning Committee to, in the form of a motion, recommend that we take this to the full board for the final vote. Do I have a motion from a committee member of this committee?
So moved.
All right. I have a motion. Second, do I have any further discussion? Then the board members that are on this committee, if you would, say aye if you're in favor.
Aye.
If not, no. So the ayes have it, and we would bring it forward tomorrow at the full board member for a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could have a point of privilege, please.
Yes.
I'd like to ask Jomar Pastorelli to waive. Jomar is part of our planning team. He did a lot of legwork and coordination with some of our scenic byway applications. So he, I have the opportunity to be before you today, but Jomar Pastorelli, Kimberly Grayson, Tom Kayapa, they really did a lot of the heavy lifting on this effort.
Great team. Thank you all so very, very much, and we'll look forward to tomorrow. Now we'll continue forward, and at this time we will hear from our planning director, Janine Miller, and she's going to update us on the electric vehicle charging station plans that we have.
I knew Red was tall. I didn't realize it was that tall. Okay. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm looking for a sign from the booth, but I don't see one, so I guess we'll take that as good news. Let's see if we can get this. Thankfully, Radney did all that. Okay. That's okay. Great. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the board members who are here today and giving me the opportunity to update you about the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan program that has just been announced at from the federal government, and some components of what that plan is, what that means for us here at GDOT, and what we'll be leading here in planning related to electric vehicle infrastructure. Want to really start, though, with Governor Kemp's launching of the Electric Mobility and Innovation Alliance back in August of 2021. He could see that the importance of electric vehicle industry for Georgia, whether it's SK Batteries, ultimately was Rivian, and there are all sorts of other auto manufacturers that will be a big part in Georgia of the electric vehicle fleet transition over time. And so with that, the governor wanted to make sure that we were orienting all of us within state government, as well as industry, electric utilities, nonprofits, around what all could we be doing, what parts do we all have to play in expanding the electric vehicle production and at all levels of the automotive production in Georgia. So he created this alliance. It was led out of the Department of Economic Development. I was honored to serve as the chair of one of the 5 committees, the Infrastructure Committee. The other committees were related to supply chain, innovation, policy, and workforce. Within our Infrastructure Committee, though, we had about 30 members. This is, again, from all sectors of our economy. We divided the work, segmented the work, so we could get particular unique perspectives around the fleet, charging, and electric utilities. So the fleet, we had OEMs, the auto manufacturers represented, as well as vehicle owners, personal and commercial vehicles, auto dealers, et cetera. For charging equipment, we had the equipment manufacturers, service providers, and site owners, and electric utilities, of course, Georgia Power, the EMCs, ECG, MEAG, and the Georgia Transportation Corporation. This was a concerted, very exciting effort that was going on during the fall, and looking forward to being able to, for our plan that we'll do, I'll talk about in a moment, to reflect all of that good work and good input from private industry. So then fast forward about 3 months, and Congress passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. There's a lot of words on here, and you'll get to see it again later. But this lays out for us the roadmap of the work that we as a state DOT have to be doing. And of course, it starts with the Congress passing the law, and at the same time, they appropriated the dollars. But right now, we are here. Last month, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program guidance was issued mid-February. So we've been digesting it for about a month and looking into all of the guidance that's there. And it's pretty exciting, it's pretty robust, and we are still unpacking all the work that we have to do. But we do know we have to turn in a plan by August 1st. So we have a lot of work to do between now and then. I'm excited to say that amongst the guidance is about 31 pages. It was issued from what's called a joint program office, and I'll talk about that in a moment. That is both energy and transportation in Washington. And in that 31 pages of guidance, the word private was mentioned 23 times. Private industry, private companies, public-private partnerships, you name it. So this will be a new foray for us in the public-private partnerships realm, but very exciting. An overview of the program. The purpose is to create a nationwide network of 500,000 EV chargers by 2030. That would match up with the president's goals of half of sales being electric vehicles by 2030. So that's our marker, is out to 2030, and what Georgia's role to play is in that. Ensuring convenient, reliable, affordable, and equitable charging for all users, with goals of accelerating equitable adoption of EVs, including those who cannot reliably charge at home, reduce transportation-related greenhouse gases, and position U.S. industries to lead the global transportation electrification efforts. Here's how we're going to as a nation, begin that work, is with $7.5 billion of funds appropriated through 2026. So that's over the full 5-year period, is $7.5 billion. 4.2 is allocated to state DOTs by a formula. We are to strategically deploy EV infrastructure for an interconnected network, and build out the, again, national network of EV, what are called alternative fuel corridors, and you'll hear about that again in a moment, particularly along the interstate highway system. So $4.2 billion over 5 years, and $500 million is for US DOT to issue grants to fill in the gaps where states cannot. And then a joint program office was set up. This is between the Departments of Transportation and Energy to provide technical assistance to all of industry. That's to the Departments of Transportation and to the electric utilities and any others who are helping to deploy all of these funds. Then there's $2.5 billion of discretionary grants for corridors and communities. That's for electric vehicle charging, but it's also for infrastructure for alternative fuels, hydrogen, propane, and natural gas. But I'm going to talk about the $4.2 billion and the part that we'll have to play at GDOT. So over the next 5 years, this is what we believe is going to be the allocation. The $20 million has, this has all been appropriated, and the $20 million is what we have for fiscal 22. Thankfully, it will carry over. We are not going to have to spend $20 million yet, because we do not have an approved plan, but we'll get to that in a moment. The plan, though, is going to guide us to where are the best places to build out electric vehicle charging along our interstates. What you can see here in the solid line, and I hope you can see the dashed lines. There are very few dashed lines. Those are what are called EV pending. But where there's a green line that's along all of our interstate highways, those are considered the designated corridors, and our job is to build those out. Building out means 4 charging stations within a mile of the interstate that are 150 kilowatts each, so it can simultaneously produce 600 kilowatts of energy to charge 4 vehicles at a time, every 50 miles. We are amongst the states, we're actually ranked about, some calculations are third, and we're going to go back and sharpen the pencil and make sure that's correct, but we think we're ranked third in terms of the number of miles that are EV designated. So we're already leading in that, and that's thanks to the department over the years, as well as Georgia Power and our electric partners. But this is where those dollars are going to go. Now, remember I mentioned private partnerships as a key part of this. Those dollars are not going to be nearly enough. We're going to hope to leverage these dollars and have private sector come to the table with us and partner to make this an even bigger program than the $117 million that we have over the next 5 years. So the federal government requires us to do a handful of things, and our plan, that's due August 1st, to prioritize those corridors and where the charging infrastructure will go, how we will implement, has to include these factors, which we will be getting started on, we hope, in the next few weeks. But we're going to do it a little bit, we'll earn some extra credit, we'll put it that way, we think, with the federal government. We're going to be very deliberative about understanding our options for deployment. That includes locations, where they should go, what's the market-driven look at where we need to locate stations and prioritize our build-out. Understanding where the electric utilities already have the ability to support that, or where they might need to build their own additional infrastructure, and what are our options to engage other state agencies in the process. The recommendations based on market-driven validation. So we're looking for the insights from the EV vehicle manufacturers themselves. They know where their customers are. They know where their customers want to go. We also know that the charging providers know where their customers are and where they want to go. But this is going to be a very careful effort to make sure we are not overbuilding. We're not using government money to overbuild where there is already private sector business that is right now in place and being generated. But we want to build where we know people will want to go, particularly in the rural areas along the interstates, to give drivers the comfort of leaving metro areas as they traverse to other cities, as they traverse in their electric vehicles to rural recreational sites and rural places of business and social activities. So really, what does the driver want to in terms of location of that charging? It's going to be market driven. And then what's the implementation plan? What are the action steps we need to take? This is brand new for us and almost every other state Department of Transportation. We've never done this type of thing before. It's exciting. And we're, like I said, we'll kick off in the next few weeks. It's due to the federal government on August 1st. And if we are able to submit a plan that they approve of at the Joint Program Office, then we will begin to spend our $20 million as of October 1st. I do believe it'll take a little bit of time to get arrangements set up. I don't see that we'll be writing checks or issuing contracts on October 1st. That's just the date by which the federal government gives us the green light to implement. So I wanted to give you that in case you're getting questions, in case you're curious about this electric vehicle program and the funds we'll have here. I wanted to give you this overview. I'll put that back up there. And the great website for all of this and lots of other information is driveelectric.gov. All right.
Any questions? Yes, Jeff?
And you're right, this is exciting. Couple of questions, and you may have mentioned it, and it escaped me. But can this be rolled out on both public property as well as private property, or is it just for public property?
It is either.
Either, okay.
Yeah, either. It's more likely that it will be on private property. And again, this kind of supports Governor Kemp's goals, and I know all of us are interested in supporting Georgia's small businesses. I think there'll be a lot of partnership with small businesses around that 1 mile radius of interstate exits.
Yeah, and are some possible partners existing gas stations right now?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Kevin.
You know, I'll share with the board and members who are here today that Our planning director presented at the pre-3 conference in Dallas. You were in and out very, very quickly on this very topic and represented our state very well, and I appreciate your participation at the conference today.
Any other remarks? Thank you so much. Very interesting. I'm sure we'll have other remarks as time goes on here.
Indeed, I look forward to it.
And questions. Before I adjourn our committee, I want to acknowledge the fact that we have a new committee member sitting here that is part of this state planning, strategic planning committee that we have. And I want to introduce that member to us, and he's our new board member, and he will be formally introduced tomorrow. But as a member of this committee, we welcome you, Dennis McIntyre. So thank you for being here. Just wanted to let the people know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any further business of the committee? We stand adjourned.